Imagine a luxury ocean liner, over 1,400 people on board, sinking in 14 minutes. Not 2 hours, like the Titanic. 14 minutes. The time it takes to drink a coffee. The time it takes you to watch this video. Most of the passengers were still sleeping in their cabins when the water swallowed them. It happened on May 29, 1914, on the St. Lawrence River in Canada. And yet, almost no one talks about it today. This is the story of the RMS Empress of Ireland. The Empress of Ireland was the pride of the Canadian Pacific Railway, built in Glasgow in 1906 by the Fairfield Company. This twin-screw vessel of 14,500 tons measured 550 feet in length. She could accommodate 350 first-class passengers, as many in second class, and 1,000 in third. She was considered a safe ship, equipped with transverse and longitudinal steel watertight bulkheads, a submarine signaling device, and a wireless system. After the Titanic disaster in 1912, the Empress had even had her lifeboats reinforced. In 8 years of service, she had become one of the favorites among travelers on the Canada to England route. On Thursday, May 28, 1914, around 4:30 in the afternoon, the Empress of Ireland leaves her quay at Quebec, bound for Liverpool. Her commander is Lieutenant Henry George Kendall of the Royal Naval Reserve. On board, 1,475 people, 87 first-class passengers, 256 in second, 717 in third, and 415 crew members. Among the passengers are remarkable figures. Sir Henry Seton-Karr, a barrister, traveller, and renowned hunter. Laurence Irving, son of the celebrated actor Sir Henry Irving, accompanied by his wife Mabel Hackney. And above all, 150 delegates of the Salvation Army, travelling to a great international congress in London. They come from all across Canada. Among them, Commissioner David Rees, head of the Salvation Army in Canada, his wife, and many of their finest officers. The farewells are said, the band plays a solemn hymn, the ship pulls away from the quay as hands, hats, and handkerchiefs are waved. The passengers settle in, inspect the ship's luxury, dine with appetite. The mood is joyful. No one suspects that for most of them, this is the last meal of their lives. Captain Kendall had been warned. Frequent fogs prevail in the lower river, and forest fires in Quebec cast blankets of smoke across the St. Lawrence. As a good seaman, he reduces speed at nightfall. The ship stops at Rimouski, a village of 2,000 inhabitants, to load mail. It is the last relay of the Canadian Postal Service. Then the Empress resumes her course, entering the wide stretch of the river, which at this point measures nearly 30 miles across. At midnight, the mercury drops to just above freezing. Few passengers are on deck. A few card games linger in the smoking room. The vast majority are asleep. At 1:30 in the morning, on Friday, May 29th, the Empress reaches Father Point, where the pilot disembarks. The ship then resumes at full speed. Shortly after, Kendall spots the Storstad, a Norwegian collier of 6,000 tons, about 2 miles away on the starboard bow. Both ships see each other clearly, but Captain Kendall notices a light band of fog rising from the coast. He knows it will pass between the two ships, and that is exactly what happens. The fog descends. The Storstad's lights disappear. Kendall orders full astern, stops, and gives 3 short blasts on the whistle. "I am going full astern." The Storstad replies with 1 long blast. Kendall verifies that his ship is motionless, gives 2 long blasts. "My vessel is stopped. Underway." The Storstad replies again. 2 minutes pass. Then Kendall sees the Storstad's red and green lights. The collier is no more than a ship's length away. Kendall shouts into the megaphone, "Full astern!" He puts his engines full ahead, hard to port, desperately. Too late. The Storstad, with her steel bow, drives straight into the starboard side of the Empress, between the funnels. The hull is torn open to a depth of about 4 meters. The water does not flow. It rushes in, like a cascade of steel and sea. What happens next lasts 14 minutes, maybe 15. Dr. James Grant, the ship's surgeon, recounts being thrown from his bunk by the list. No light, no electricity. He crawls through the slanted corridor, sticks his head through a porthole, and a passenger pulls him out. 100 people are already on the side of the ship. So is he. Captain Kendall, wounded on the bridge, gives the order that sums it all up. The ship is lost. Women to the boats. He orders the young wireless operator, Edward Bomford, to send the distress signal. Bomford, who had just taken his watch to relieve Ronald Ferguson, had been thrown to the floor by the impact. He gets up, rushes to his post, and taps out SOS again and again for 10 minutes, broadcasting the news over a range of 500 miles. Several ships pick up the call, but they are hours away. 14 minutes is too short for anyone. Captain Kendall shouts to the Storstad to keep her engines ahead to plug the breach. But the Storstad, according to Kendall, reverses. According to Anderson, it is the Empress that pulls away by moving ahead, wrenching the collier's bow out of the gash. The truth is, water pours in through a mortal wound. An explosion sounds. In reality, the air pressure driven out by the water flooding the compartments. The list worsens instantly. The stewards have no time to wake the passengers. Those who hear the cries come up in pajamas, in nightgowns. Many who waited to dress are dead. The boats are launched at record speed. 9 boats in the water in 12 minutes. Under normal circumstances, during a port drill, it takes 5 minutes for a single boat. Here, with a ship listing more and more, water flooding the stern, the deck on a slope, the men perform a miracle of discipline. Captain Kendall himself crosses the port deck, tears off the covers of boats 1, 3, 5, and 7, then returns to the bridge. He is then thrown into the sea when the ship rolls over, sucked into the whirlpool, and picked up by a boat that hears him crying out. But the time is so short that hundreds of passengers will never reach the deck. They are trapped in their cabins like rats. The list worsens. Water floods everything. The ship rolls onto her starboard side. Passengers who could not get above cling to the rail, climb onto the hull plates, then slide into the freezing water, like walking down a beach to bathe, one survivor will say. Then the Empress gives one last shudder, as if giant hands were pulling her down by the bottom. She tips over and disappears beneath the surface. Screams. Hundreds of people in the black water at 2 in the morning at 0 degrees. Howls, groans, cries for help that die out one by one in the cold. Edward Bomford's SOS signal had been picked up. At Farther Point, the wireless operator J. McWilliams, half hysterical, runs down the quay to the Eureka, the small mailboat. He shouts to Captain Boulanger, "For the love of God, head down river immediately! The Empress of Ireland has sunk!" The Eureka and the Lady Evelyn, a government vessel, launch into the night. When they arrive at the scene, the surface of the river is calm and sinister. Debris floats, lifeboats packed with survivors in shock, and bodies. 50 corpses are pulled from the water in the first hours. Women weep as they scan the faces of the dead, searching for loved ones. The Storstad, also badly damaged, has put all her boats in the water. Her crew of 27 men saves between 250 and 400 people. Captain Anderson and his wife give away all their clothes to the survivors. Mrs. Anderson, dressed in a simple blue cotton dress because she has given away everything else, distributes stimulants to the survivors. Stories of bravery are many. Dr. Grant, once picked up by a boat, immediately sets to work on the Storstad, treating the injured, reviving the drowned, working without rest. He will save dozens of lives. Sir Henry Seton-Karr, in the corridor, literally forces his life jacket onto a stranger, Mr. Darling, then pushes him out. Darling will survive. Sir Henry returns to his cabin. He will never come out. Laurence Irving, the actor, helps his wife Mabel into a life jacket. The ship pitching, he is thrown against a door, his face bloody. He stays calm. He forces his wife out of the cabin. The last man to see them alive says they were embracing on deck when the ship went down. They died together, as they would have wished. H.R. O'Hara from Toronto has only 2 life jackets for himself, his wife, and their child. He straps them onto the 2 of them, hoping the buoyancy will be enough for 3. In the water, he sees them sinking. He slips behind them and lets himself go down. His wife and child will survive. Kenneth McIntyre, a Salvation Army member, takes off his own life jacket to pass it to a woman near him just before the ship's final plunge. He survives anyway, swimming 1.5 miles in the freezing water. Robert Crellin, a farmer, swims with a little girl of 8 on his back. Florence Barber does not cry, does not complain. She has lost her mother and her little sister. Crellin will swear she will always have a home as long as he breathes. And there is the Salvation Army. On deck, as the ship sinks, the Salvationists sing, "God be with you till we meet again." They sing until the water swallows them. Out of 150 delegates, 124 perish. 22 people die after being rescued, from their injuries or exposure to the cold. The survivors arrive at Rimouski in pajamas, undressed or wrapped in blankets. The villagers open their homes, their wardrobes, brew hot coffee. The mayor, Mr. Fizet, coordinates the relief effort. Every doctor in town works for hours. On Sunday morning, the government ship Lady Grey arrives at Quebec with 188 coffins. Coffins of all sizes, stacked on deck. The small white coffins of children make even the most hardened sailors weep. In a port shed turned into a morgue, families search for their dead, lifting lids one by one. 2 fathers claim the same baby. The mayor of Quebec must decide, like a judgment of Solomon. The Canadian Parliament is in shock. Prime Minister Borden declares, "The most dreadful shock this country has ever known." Sir Wilfrid Laurier notes that, proportionally to the number of passengers, the loss of life exceeds that of the Titanic. King George V, the French President Poincaré, and the American President Wilson send messages of condolence. The question of responsibility poisons the atmosphere. Captain Kendall accuses the Storstad of striking a stopped ship. Captain Anderson accuses the Empress of having maintained speed. The 2 versions are irreconcilable. An inquiry commission is established, chaired by Lord Mersey, the same man who had presided over the Titanic inquiry. The debate over fault will last for months, each side shifting the blame onto the other. So why did the Empress of Ireland sink into oblivion while the Titanic is universally known? The answer comes down to one word: context. 6 weeks later, Europe goes to war. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated in Sarajevo. By August, it is the First World War. The world has other things to think about than a shipwreck on a Canadian river. And then, unlike the Titanic, the Empress had no flamboyant millionaires on board, no myth of the unsinkable ship. She was an ordinary ship on an ordinary route, struck by an ordinary evil: fog. But the lessons, they are extraordinary. The Empress had enough boats for everyone. She had watertight bulkheads. She had wireless. None of it was enough. Because 14 minutes is too short. Too short to wake 1,000 sleeping people. Too short to launch enough boats. Too short for help to arrive. Dr. Grant said the disaster was so sudden that hundreds of passengers never left their bunks. They died without understanding what was happening. Logan Marshall's book, published a few months after the tragedy, concludes that every maritime disaster brings its share of lessons, and that the world ignores them every time. The Titanic taught us we needed more boats. The Empress taught us that boats are useless if you don't have time to launch them. 1,475 people boarded the Empress of Ireland on May 28, 1914. 397 survived. 1,078 died in 14 minutes. On a calm river, on a foggy night, at 2 in the morning, a few hundred meters from another ship that watched them sink, powerless to do anything. If this story moved you, share it, because it may be the last thing these 1,078 people deserve: to be remembered.